Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum assalam. Hello, how are you? How are you? Hello. If you can trust that translation once again. This is Uncle Muhammad. I share with you topics pertaining to the science or the scientific miracles, if you wish, in the Quran. Today's topic is going to make some noise. We shall speak about the Big Bang. But before we do so, the Big Bang, the scientific miracle of the Big Bang in the Quran. But before we do so, I'll explain. Usual procedure. In fact, we'll rehearse the first ayah, verse from the Quran, which is an introductory ayah to the general topic of the scientific miracles in the Quran, so to speak. And we'll discuss a little bit, very little this time, about the Big Bang. Afterwards, we'll rehearse and translate two verses from two different surahs which are relevant to today's topic. And we end, as usual, with our, in a nutshell, verse, which is the conclusion verse of the topic of the scientific miracles in the Quran. So, actually, the first ayah in the introductory ayah, the second term in this ayah is a homonym. And I have to explain what the homonym is, don't I? The homonym is actually an alternative hummus recipe. What, you don't know what hummus is? Basically, you soak chickpeas, dried chickpeas, you soak them overnight in water, and you boil them for half an hour the following day, and then you grate them, and you put a couple of other things like garlic and tahini. And if you don't know what tahini is, I'm not talking to you again. No, I was just kidding. I'm sure you know what garlic is. Just kidding you again. The true meaning of a homonym is actually just a word or a term which has two meanings or more than two meanings. So the first ayah we'll rehearse is Fussilat 41:53. Fussilat is a surah in the Quran. It is the 41st surah in the Quran, and we will rehearse verse 53, which is سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم حتى يتبين لهم أنه الحق. Translation goes, سنريهم آياتنا, we shall show them our verses, we shall show them our signs, as it is a homonym, في الآفاق, الآفاق, in the high heavens, in the heavens above, in the skies, in the universe, في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم. في أنفسهم means in their own bodies. حتى يتبين لهم أنه الحق. Until such time, it is clear, it is evident, it is manifest to them that this is the truth. أنه الحق, الحق is the truth. So this is our introductory verse. So we shall show them our verses in the universe, our verses, our signs in the universe, until such time that they know this is the truth. What is this? This is the Quran, is the verses, is the signs, is the revelation of God in the Quran. And our topic today, as we mentioned, it's the Big Bang. What is the Big Bang? The Big Bang, big noise. Well, they refer to it as an explosion from which emanates, or that's how this world was created some 13 billion and 800 years ago, approximately. Or that's the figure most scientists use. Now, they call it the Big Bang. I don't know why. An explosion, I haven't heard anything, have you? Oh, still no noise. No, the Big Bang, in fact, the Big Bang is agreed. It's actually agreed by all scientists, cosmologists, physicists. It's actually agreed that is indeed how the universe was created. The date as well, the vast majority agree on that date. I mean, what difference does it make to us if it is 11 or 13 or 14 billion years ago, in any case? So it is agreed by the scientists. It is actually when the universe was created. In this universe, we are given to understand by the scientists, by the physicists, by the cosmologists, we are given to understand that there are approximately 2 trillion galaxies. Trillions. I believe a trillion is a billion of a billion. That's what a trillion is. So 2 trillions of galaxies were created from an explosion. And the first person who suggested the Big Bang theory was, believe it or not, a Belgian. And believe it or not, he was a Catholic priest, but he was also a physicist and a cosmologist. And his name is Georges Lemaitre. So it was in 1927. There are a couple of different dates, a couple of years before, a couple of years afterwards, but the date which is retained in most time is 1927. So in 1927, this theory was suggested by the Belgian Catholic priest, physicist, cosmologist, as the Big Bang theory. Now, I think it's best if we just leave it here. This is how the universe was created. We'll leave it here. We'll rehearse to you the 2 verses and we'll bring some other facts afterwards. We'll discuss a couple of facts after rehearsing the 2 verses. So if this was only mentioned for the first time in 1927, some 14 centuries ago, rather 14 and a half centuries ago, in the Quran, it is stated in Al-Anbiya, Surah Al-Anbiya, the prophets, the story of the prophets, 21:30, Allah Jalla fi'ula, Azza wa Jal, states, أَوَلَمْ يَرَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَنَّ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ كَانَتَا رَتْقًا فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ أَفَلَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. Now you need someone to translate, don't you? Lucky I'm around, if you trust my translation. No, but this is a serious matter. There's time for jesting, for kidding, and there's time for very serious matter, which is very important to you, anyone who watches. So, أَوَلَمْ يَرَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, have the non-believers not seen? A few times in the Quran it's mentioned, have you not seen? Of course, we weren't there, we haven't seen, but Allah Jalla fi'ula, and in his wisdom, uses the term seen to give us some facts that, in fact, like these scientific miracles, you can concretely touch them. You can touch the existence of God subhanahu azza wa jal. You can touch it in these verses. So he said, do the non-believers, so those who do not believe in the existence of God, do they not see that the skies and the earth were one entity? كانتا رتقا, one entity, one mass. ففتقناهما, and we split them asunder, we separated them. ففتقناهما وجعلنا من الماء كل شيء حي, and we have made from water every living thing. Would they then not believe? أفلا يؤمنون. Would they then not believe? So God have given us the proof. Why wouldn't you believe in the existence of God if he has given us the proof? And it is compatible with modern science. So this is the first verse. We shall take another verse from Fussilat 41:11, different, but it discusses also the how the universe, how God created the universe. In Fussilat 41:7, ثم استوى إلى السماء وهي دخان فقال لها وللأرض ائتيا طوعا أو كرها قالتا آتينا طائعين. Translation again. And he directed, he is Allah Azza wa Jal, Jalla fi'ula. So Allah directed himself to the sky, and it was smoke. And he said to it, to the sky, and to the earth, come. Like come hither, but rather come into being. This is the Big Bang. Come into being. So come willingly or reluctantly. So come whether willingly or by force. Come into being. And they both answered, qalata. Both of them answered. And they said, we come willingly, in willing obedience. So they said, we come willingly. So this is yet again the sky and the earth were one entity, and there was smoke, and Allah asked them to come into being, commanding them to come into being, so as to create the universe as we know it, or the universe as we don't know it. No one does. Even the physicists, and the most famous of them, such as the English and Mancunian from Manchester City, Brian Cox. He's a professor at Manchester University. He's one of the leading scholars and knowledgeable man in the world about cosmology. So this is it. We know that the universe was created from the Big Bang, as the scientists refer to it. Okay. But the point I wanted to make, I'm awfully sorry, is that they're still discovering many other planets. We say 2 trillion galaxies, but they're still sometimes in one go, just recently, a couple of months ago, so in one single go, they discovered 450 stars. I think it was 450 stars, I'm fairly sure. They discovered in one go, just by looking through these modern equipment and modern telescopes and what have you. So the thing we need to point here, the 2 verses were rehearsed to you, actually, 14.5 centuries ago, that Allah stated this in the Quran, that the revelation came from Allah through the angel Gabriel to the Prophet, angel Gabriel alayhi salam, to the Prophet Muhammad salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. They came to him 14.5 centuries ago, but only in 1927, for the first time, that the scientists even suggested, and from then up to now, there's still a lot of things are still developing all the time. In fact, when you ask scientists, and talking about Brian Cox, I watched a couple of videos, or a few videos of his of late, so in preparation of this subject, for instance, and sometimes he goes all over the world, Australia, wherever, New Zealand. So, and he goes and they ask him questions, and when he replies to the questions, and it's not the only one. It's not to demean him, as he is one of the. It's not to demean by any means, because he's one of the leading scholars in the world. But when you ask him 10 questions, he'll barely reply to 8. Why? First, because he's honest, and secondly, because he knows these things develop all the time, constant development. If he says one thing today, tomorrow could be in a few months, in a year's time, in 10 years' time, it may change. So, but something that I would like to share with you, and it's extremely important. I mentioned to you one of the previous videos that the Egyptian scholar, he used to be a geologist, but he actually resigned as a professor in geology or whatever, and he dedicated his life to the scientific miracles in the Quran. His name, Zaghlul al-Najjar, will display his name. And he said once that the Quran is not only 100% compatible with modern science, the Quran is more advanced than modern science. Now, in this topic about the Big Bang, we have 2 interesting facts, alarming facts, important facts about how the Quran is more advanced. It's a proof beyond reasonable doubt. No one can have a shadow of a doubt about this fact. First, This is mentioned in 1927 for the first time, discovered by Georges Lemaitre, but mentioned in the Quran in these two verses we just rehearsed to you about 1,450 years ago. So clearly the Quran is more advanced than modern science. But there is another fact. I said equally more important, it's even more important. Now, recently, within the last few months, the scientists are saying, cosmologists are actually saying that there was something else there before the Big Bang. The Big Bang is not really the beginning. There was something before. So this something before, we rehearsed to you two verses. In the first verse, the sky and the earth were one mass. What did God say? Kanata. They used to be one mass. They used to be one entity. Allah did not say they didn't exist. They existed under a different form. But God, from that different form, created the universe as we know it. The scientists are slowly coming. And the second verse also, he said, ثم استوى إلى السماء وهي دخان. So he directed himself, Allah directed himself to the sky, and it was smoke. So God clearly tells us he directed himself to the sky and it was smoke. It doesn't mean it didn't exist. Now, Brian Coxon, I forgot the name of another scholar, probably an African-American or scholar, but I forgot his name. But they say now, probably among others, I'm not knowledgeable in the field, probably among many others, that there was something else before. What does God tell us in these two verses? One, the sky. I repeat, sorry if I repeat too much, but it is highly important to know that the Quran is more advanced than science. And the more science advances, it will only find that the Quran is 10 streets in front, or decades or centuries in front. This is the truth. So the sky and the earth were one mass. It means they existed before the Big Bang. In a different form, of course, because that's when they were created, and the whole universe with all the galaxies and all the planets and everything were created in the Big Bang. This is, the scientists are correct about this, but now they're saying there was something before. Maybe we made a mistake. Maybe there was some. So now the answer is in these two verses, and I share it with you for the sole fact to understand that Allah is a reality. It's not an imagination of conservative people, as some atheists or whatever say. So one needs to ponder and think about these verses and about the entire Quran and about all the scientific miracles in the Quran, so as to find out the truth about God. There is nothing more important for us than this particular truth, to find out if God really exists or not. And for those who do not believe or follow some other falsehood or whatever, I invite you all to read the Quran, to ponder, to think, to analyze, to take notes, and to decide for yourselves what the truth is. I will end as usual with, I hope I haven't forgotten anything, but I think that's it. I will end as usual with our, in a nutshell, verse, which concludes the general topic of the scientific miracles in the Quran. And it is Luqman 31:25. Luqman is the name of the surah. Luqman used to be a pious man, he's not a prophet. And it's 31 is the number, is the surah number 31, 31st surah in the Quran, and the verse number 25. And it goes, وَلَئِنْ سَأَلْتَهُمْ مَنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهِ. If you were to ask them who created the skies and the earth, they would say Allah. God created them. Now, one would probably automatically think that when you say, well, if you were to ask them, or if you ask them, you would think it refers to people who believe in God. of course, because people who believe God says, yeah, we know it's God who created the sky. But no, if you read a couple, 2 or 3 verses before, you will find out that once again, he's talking about the non-believers. And if you were to ask the non-believers who created the sky, they would say God. Even the non-believers, the atheist, the agnostic, who created 2 trillion galaxies. It can only be but Allah. But one important point that I forgot, I said, have I forgotten anything? Yes, I have. What I forgot to mention is that some of these well-known physicists, cosmologists, scientists, they are knowledgeable people, but some of them are still atheists. But if they were to put 2 and 2 together and do it, 2 and 2 is here, they say that the Big Bang was an explosion, hence the name, the Big Bang. That's why I asked you if you've heard the noise. So if they say an explosion, now from one single explosion, 2 trillion galaxies are created. And they're created with precision, with a precision that we cannot explain. We cannot comprehend, we cannot quantify this precision, because everything is functioning perfectly well. Everything is harmonious in these 2 trillion galaxies. How can an explosion make something that is perfect? It is, in a sense, an insult to human intelligence to believe so. Because if there was an explosion anywhere, any form of explosion, the explosion destroys. So from explosion, there's nothing but chaos. And never 2 trillion galaxies which are functioning in a perfect manner. So that is why, once again, we invite you to think and ponder. And we invite the scientists. I've sent a few messages to Brian Cox. I hope one day, inshallah, if I manage, I can speak to him and share with him a lot of these scientific miracles which are in the Quran, because they are very knowledgeable people. They are the best even to understand and to explain to us and to discover others, because as we said, the Quran is more advanced than science. That means only when science develops would we find out other scientific miracles. So we wait and see. Watch the space, as we're talking about. It remains for me to say to you, Assalamu alaikum wa akhiru da'wana walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.